Hello, and thank you for joining the session. Today we're going to continue working on Stalker. We're working with a package called EventSauce and using the Laravel framework. Early on, what we decided to do was to start by creating our own message repository. For people who are unfamiliar with event sourcing, the message repository is going to be where all of the events are going to live. In our implementation, it's based off of the official EventSauce Doctrine repository. So we're going to take a look at that real quick just so that we can get sort of a reminder. So let's go ahead and go GitHub, EventSauce. Here we go. So the EventSauce repository, or the Doctrine repository, originally had a MySQL implementation and a Postgres, but they've been deprecated as everything can be done with one. I have run into cases where this doesn't seem to be working for me with MySQL, so I have to, at least right now, make everything be on, everything has to be on Postgres that I'm doing with these, which is fine. It's not a huge deal, but it is something to be aware of if you've been following along and trying to do something with MySQL instead. It doesn't necessarily work. So there were a couple of things that we added to this. One of them was that I wanted to use a single table for all of the different aggregate routes. The default implementation or the reference implementation that EventSauce ships doesn't actually support that very well. We added it here, so we added the aggregate route. Where is it at? Oh, actually, this is the other version. Within our implementation, I'll pull that up right now. We actually added the aggregate route type, which was something that wasn't in there before. So what this is going to do is allow us to put all of the events, regardless of the aggregate route type, in the same file. I actually played with this a little bit outside of Astrocasts and discovered that there might actually be some challenges with the way everything else is handled to support that. So we'll have to look at those as we hit them. One of the other things that we tried to do on the last session was use the built-in Doctrine implementation or the Doctrine connection from Laravel. What we ended up doing was just ignoring it, but one of our viewers actually submitted a pull request that fixed this for us. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. There we go. And so it turned out to be super simple. All we had to do was call get Doctrine Connection. So I don't know why this was not easily Googleable, but this is pretty straight ahead. The downside to this, though, this PR actually updated everything from using our Laravel implementation to using the Doctrine Connection implementation instead. The downside to this is that I found out that the DB transaction and the connection transaction don't actually work well together. So this is something I think we're going to tackle today. So if we look at this this tool is not nearly as handy as I'd like it to be. If we take a look here, what we can see is that if you call DB transactional, and inside of it call get Doctrine Connection transactional, this code never actually runs because the throws is an exception. The save point implementation for Laravel's transaction isn't compatible or doesn't know anything about doctrines and vice versa. So it doesn't matter if you do the Laravel transaction first and then Doctrine, or do the Doctrine transaction and then the Laravel transaction. Either way, this isn't going to work. So I'm going to actually show this in real time here. So let's go ahead and run to Tinker. And so yeah, so it says there's already an active transaction, so it doesn't allow it. And if we do the other way, it's going to give us the same error. So what I think I'd like to try to do, because this could actually turn out to be something useful even beyond this could be useful even beyond like Astrocasts, would be to see if we can get some sort of wrapper here that actually works. So I'm going to try and do that first. So we're not really going to jump into the other code just yet. I'm going to see if we can get this to work. Essentially, I want to be able to ask the app for a Doctrine connection, which is going to be the Doctrine DBL connection class. Then I want to be able to run these commands and have it not actually give us a problem. So I'm going to rerun Tinker with these now. Ooh, unresolvable dependency. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. AppServiceProvider. Let's see, I think what I had done was, did I remove it? Or maybe I actually need to get, hey Frank, thanks for joining. Yeah, it looks like I actually need to get stash. There we go. Just make sure that I'm up here. So Frank, we're not actually doing a whole lot with EventSauce just yet, but we are going to be working on something that hopefully makes it work better. All right, so I'm going to go back into Tinker now, and this should work as expected. So, well, it should actually give us a problem, which would be what we'd expect. All right, so we're still getting that error. So what we need to do, or what I'd like to try doing, is going into, oh, there we go. Let's go into AppServiceProvider, and here we go. So what I'd like to do is see if we can maybe wrap this Doctrine connection in something else. So let's go ahead and just prototype in here, new class. Implements, and then we're going to do connection. So we're going to do Doctrine DBL driver connection. I think that's not what we want. We want, is that what we imported already? We want Doctrine DBL connection. What's driver connection actually? Yeah, Doctrine DBL driver connection. All right, so that's what we want to use. All right, so events connection, driver connection. All right, and then let's actually implement this. Been on my laptop keyboard for a little while, so I'm having some issues getting used to my actual proper keyboard that doesn't have problems like the laptop one does. So let's implement. I wonder if I can actually do this. I don't think I can. See if I can use PHP to use __call to satisfy the interface requirements. PHP use. Because if not, then this isn't going to be nearly as cool as I thought it would be. There we go. Launch something akin to this using a trait. I don't want to use a trait. All right, so I can't do that. So I'm just going to, I was going to try and use one of Laravel's tools called forwards call, but it looks like that isn't actually going to be doable. So we are going to have to implement everything here, which is annoying. So let's do public function query. How does this? No, let's not do that. I don't understand. Prepare string. I would have expected more of these to have parameters, but I guess not. So let's see if we can just get it to work then. And we're going to have another, let's see, what is driver connection? We're going to have another instance of this passed in. Get doctrine. Is that not working? Not sure why that's not working. I think it's because I don't have the IDE helpers set up. What I was thinking is we could actually pass this in. DBL connection. Because we're actually getting driver connection here. Let's try DBL driver connection. See if this actually works. Oh, connection string. Huh, where's that in it? It's interesting. I don't know why I tried to do that on me. Okay, so one passes must be Doctrine DBL connection. All right, so it needs this. So this connection is different. Let's see if that works. No, still has a problem. It's anonymous class given. So I want to double check this. So this isn't an interface. I wonder if I have to do this. Okay, so get declaring class name. So now it's having an issue with Doctrine DBL connection. All right, so what I had before was a connection, implements driver. Return new class connection implements. This should work, but I think what the problem is that this is actually, so I'm going to try this again. And if this isn't going to work much after this, I think I'm going to switch to do something else. So now I'm going to do this app singleton. Let's do connection. And that's going to be satisfied by this. Maybe this could actually turn out to be a really bad idea. Yeah, okay. Instance of class anonymous. I don't think that should be a problem because this anonymous class actually implements what it's supposed to. Connection. Doctrine DBL connection. Oh, I know what it is. So this is a case of the DB message repository being too specific on what it's bringing in. So rather than bringing in DBL connection, I should be bringing in the driver connection. I should be bringing in the interface. So let's do, there we go, DBL driver. There we go. Okay, so we at least got that. So let's go ahead and try running this command now. So I think this is actually going to be wrong. So yeah, it gets us an anonymous class. Let's do see if we still get an error if we do this. Anonymous call to undefined message. Okay, so transactional doesn't exist. So I think that might actually be defined in DVL connection. Wrapper around doctrine. Yeah, okay. Okay. Slight change in plans then. Not going to do this. I'm going to switch this back to connection. And let's do... let's see how transactional is actually implemented. So begin transaction. So it does a bunch of these things. So that might actually... this might actually work. Restore my changes here. This definitely will not work, though. All right, I think this isn't going to work like I wanted it to. So what that means is that although this was awesome that we got the Doctrine Connection stuff working, I think for the time being we need to actually do this using the Laravel implementation, which is a bummer because I was hoping we could do something cool with this, but I don't think that it's not going to be as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. So the side effect of this is that our implementation for our message repository has to use the Laravel transaction handling. Otherwise, there could be potential for transactions on the Laravel side using Eloquent or whatever conflicting with what we have here. So as nice as it was that we finally figured out how to get Doctrine Connection in here, I just don't think we can actually do it. So let's do db. I'll just look at the... oh, yeah, it was just an insert. So we'll do that. Use SQL and params. So while we're in here, I am going to remove the aggregate route ID column, aggregate route ID type, because that's not super important. So I know now why Frank did not have this in there initially, because it doesn't provide a lot of value. So I'm going to remove those. Let's see where this one is. Okay, it's down there. So remove this. Aggregate route ID column. Okay. Make sure I got them all. Okay, cool. That does mean that I'm going to do something that I can only do because I haven't really pushed this anywhere else. So in other words, it hasn't actually gone into production or anything. So I tend to just edit existing migrations. I'm not sure if other people agree with that or not, but until something actually starts going into production, I generally don't worry about that. So I'm going to remove Aggregate Route ID type because that's seriously didn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now. What else? We go to the original implementation, and let's go ahead and add all of this. README. All right, the other thing I'm going to do is update EventSauce. Oops. Because that's something that has updated since I did this last, so it might change a few things. Let's do and see what things fail. I do believe the interface changed slightly. EventSauce now supports snapshots. So if we look at the current implementation, there's a difference between retrieve all and retrieve everything, and then retrieve all after versions. If we look at our implementation here, we can see that we only had retrieve all. I think only one of the other methods is actually part of the interface. But there are two other methods that we're going to be bringing into here. Okay, so it's brought it in. Cool. And if we go to the top, this should, oh, that's interesting. Message repository. I guess some of those were not actually, I guess a couple of them weren't used. Retrieve all after version. I thought that came from here. Huh. All right, maybe it doesn't. Retrieve all is only used for integration testing the implementation. All right, thanks, Frank. For some reason, I thought one of them was actually so we have retrieve all. Okay, so this I guess is the only one we really have to worry about. So let's go ahead and do retrieve all. We have actually message serializer. So this is using this connection. That's not actually, oh. Yeah, so this is actually going to require some changes. Okay, select payload. So let's do, to do this with Eloquence Query Builder. So db table, events, select payload from table table name order. So re-implementing this isn't actually all that big of a deal. Order by time of recording. So Frank, if you're still on, I'm curious to know how this time of recording has actually worked out versus ordering by the event ID. Mostly because, or something like this ID table where it's actually incrementing. It seems like something like this would be more stable for getting things actually in order that they were recorded. just curious how your experience has been with those, if you want to share that. I think that I probably would tend to want to order by time of recording and ID or something like that, or ID first and then time of recording. And then we'll do all. In practice, so Frank says, in practice, it comes down to being precise enough. Since PHP now has microtime specific dates, even two instances created after each other are unique. Okay, I'll just go with that then. Let's see, all? No, get. I think that this probably isn't going to really be able to do much with the generator because it's not really, I don't think this actually returns a generator. It just gets it all at the same time. They're each, there we go, let's try this. For each, while chunking, so chunk count. No, I don't think that's actually going to work. Map. Let's see what was in here. So all payload. I may just have to do best effort on this. No, actually, it's not doing this. It's not calling that at all. So I actually tried to implement this, all of these extra functions or extra methods in a different implementation. Kind of forgot what's going on here. Okay. Get. Let's just do get. So this would be an advantage to having, this would be an advantage to being able to use Doctrine if it was actually able to do this on a more granular scale of getting each individual item versus getting everything into rows. It isn't clear to me if this is, unless this returns, unless there's a generator somewhere in here, I don't think it's going to be as fancy as what Frank had originally. I think the each method would work, but getting them all would be fine too. Depends on how many events you're fetching. Yeah. But I don't know if each. What's the callback expected to do? Yeah, so we could do something in each, but it's not actually going to give us access to them. Do map? No. Get. Let's try this and see. Maybe this behind the scenes will do something interesting. Turn. Let's just be done with this. So I think what we can do is then return payload. Actually, let's do yield. Well, can I actually return? This requires this to be a generator. All right, so Laravel 6 has lazy collections. I haven't actually done anything with this. You can yield from inside a return. So I can do yield here. Does that work? Let's see if this works. So all right, so let's see what we get. Undefined column error, aggregate route ID, type. There, forgot this part. All right, so we removed this column, but I forgot to remove it in one more place. Okay, so everything seems to work. The yielding all works and everything. So let's open up Table Plus. And we should see stuff in here. All right, cool. So now we should be able to do something else with wiring. We should be able to get the item. So let's do this stuff here. Oh. All right, let's do item ID equals argument see if we can find item from string item ID. And so we need to do not enough arguments. All right, so what we need to do is pass in the aggregate route ID. Okay, cool, we're getting somewhere. Undefined column error, column date, okay, time of recording does not exist. That was something else that we switched. So we did recorded at, I believe. Yeah, so recorded at. Instead of time of recording. If that's all we had to do, that'll be pretty awesome. Call to undefined method generator event. Let's see, Frank says, I think you may have to loop over the top level result. The one from to array and call yield on all of the items. This one here. Call yield. Well, that would be weird, but let's try it. So let's do dollar. So it looks like Frank was right on that. Good job, Frank. Thank you so much. That saved me an unknown amount of time. So what I'm seeing here is that this is kind of messy, and I think I would like to fix this eventually. I just don't know if we can actually fix it now. But just for anyone following along here, what we actually did was rehydrated the catalog item with this ID, and we can see the name, which is what it should be. We can also see that it has an aggregate root version of 2. So now we should be able to do wiring. What I'm going to do is, first time, we did something with second time somewhere. Here, we renamed it. So now that we have item, we can do item rename. And we'll do, just do random int between 0 and 15, or 150. And then this catalog save. And so now every time we rerun wiring, what we should end up getting is incrementing, or not incrementing, but every time through it should theoretically give us a different value. So right after we do the rename, what we should see is one new recorded event. After we save the item, we should see that recorded event go away, but we should have a new value for name. So let's see if we can reproduce this or get the examples I'm expecting. All right, so it looks like our new name now is 126 with an aggregate root version of 3. Before we had done that, we still had aggregate root version 3 because it has actually consumed a new event, but it did have this renamed event in its recorded events. So if I keep doing this, we're going to keep getting different numbers. So it looks like everything is more or less working the way we wanted it to. So one of the things that I had a discussion with Frank about on Twitter is the fact that this retrieval method only accepts an aggregate root ID. If you recall, we did switch the way that we were handling persistence so that it also was looking at the aggregate root type. And so we had to figure out how to get the aggregate root type into the metadata so that when we saved the messages for a particular aggregate root, that it would actually save that information as well. We don't have any access to that here. There is no additional metadata that's going in. We are only passing in an aggregate root ID. So our options are kind of limited. In theory, and the path that Frank was sort of suggesting is that we don't do anything with that. We just accept the fact that we're being passed in an aggregate root ID. We're relying on the fact that, in theory, there are no other collisions for that aggregate root ID. So we're always going to get back out an object of the type we expect because we're being passed a specific aggregate root ID. So when we did this on the command line, we didn't even think about it. We just said, here's the aggregate root ID, and we're getting something back out. We don't have to tell it what type. So I think that's probably going to be fine. There is, like, if we were going to try and be a little more specific, and I have had situations in the past where I've had aggregate roots that shared IDs. I don't think that was necessarily the best idea. But I have seen other people do those sorts of things in the past. Say user registration, for example. The user registration ID becomes the user ID after user registration has been completed, is I think the example that I've seen before. Same thing for like shopping cart IDs and things like that, where the shopping cart, a specific instance of a shopping cart becomes the order once the shopping cart has actually gone through the order process. So that's the only case where I think this could be complicated, because in that case, when you put in the ID, if you only give the ID, and you don't have the context of is it the shopping cart or is it the order, you're going to get a mixture of events back, which isn't going to be probably what you'd expect. I think we're just going to avoid that problem for now, though, and know that with at least within our application, that's not going to be an issue. This is probably the only thing that really is pushing me more in the direction of not actually caring about the aggregate root version at all here, and having a table per aggregate root. I haven't done that yet. I know a bunch of systems do it. I just wanted to see how flexible we could be with EventSauce on this. So far, it's been pretty flexible. That's the only case where I think I know how we could do it. We could add an additional constructor. We're already taking table name here. We could probably pass in some additional information as well, including the aggregate root type that we're looking for. We're kind of already doing that. If we look in our AppServiceProvider, that's kind of how we're handling our EventSauce catalog here. We're actually passing in information, additional information into the constructing aggregate root repository to tell it which class we're actually using. So we're passing in the aggregate root type here. It's being created based on the class name inflector and the item class. So we could probably do something similar where we could create a DB message repository that is specific to a specific class, but this just starts to get really messy. So I'm not going to do any of that. We're just going to kind of leave it as it is. So I think what I'd like to do is see if we can get some of this cleaned up so that we can at least get it more working here. So let's do, I want this wiring command to accept an ID or not. So I think I can do that. I think you can do that by specifying signature by saying it's optional. It's at the end maybe. So item ID is only going to be optional. So we'll do if an item ID is passed, what we're going to do is do some of these things to it to get the item and do some renaming and things like that. Otherwise, we're going to do this part. It's just a really big if statement. It's kind of annoying, but I think it is just what it is at this point. Else, so if we have if we specify an item ID, we'll make changes to it. Otherwise, we'll generate a brand new item ID. Item import, first item. All right, so let's see if this works, and then we'll keep cleaning. All right, so if it's not passed, it created a brand new, so 98C3 is what we see here. Do another one. We see it has a completely different UUID. So let's go ahead and use this now and see that it's okay. So it's using the aggregate root version. Interesting. It's actually a little surprising to me. That's not what I would have expected. Frank, if you're still there, is this wrong, or am I misunderstanding aggregate root version? I thought aggregate root version would be unique to the object itself, like an individual item, for example. So what I'm seeing here looks like it's not the case. name is 95. This should indeed, so Frank, you said that should indeed be the case. Is what's happening now right? Is the where query okay? Let's see here. What where query? Oh, that's fun times. There we go. So this one's 15, 16, 17. If I create a brand new one, it's 2. And if I use its ID, we should see 3, 4. If we go back to the other one, 11, 12, 13, 5, 6, 7, 14, 15. Okay, so it looks like it's working now. Yeah, so I didn't quite copy and paste, and I didn't quite catch the where clause, apparently. So now it seems to be working. All right, so let's clean up some of this other mess. We're actually printing out some stuff in a couple of places. Let's see, so DB message repository. All right. All right, so we're still dumping stuff. Let's see if we can figure out where that's happening. Other than just in the command itself. Oh. Yeah, okay, so we're just dumping things in the command. So I guess that's fine. So at least now the persistence is working. We're able to retrieve from the class as well. So I think that's probably pretty good for where we're at. Why is this red? Take care, Frank. Thanks for joining. All right. So we have this fully implemented for our message repository, and we can see that we're doing all the things that we wanted to do. I'm going to probably leave these here so that other people can play with them. Here, I'm going to remove this. So this wasn't supposed to be there twice. Let's see how this looks now. All right. Cleans it up at least a little bit. All right, so this should give people something to play with if they are going to want to do this. Let's do this. App Composer. Let's take a look at our notes then. So we didn't get around to this. I think I might just have to punt on this for now. We did remove the Aggregate Route ID, and we were able to bring this all in. So one thing I do want to do is clean up, let's see, want to clean up this bit here where we are creating our EventSauce catalog in this case. The way that I've done this in another project is I've created a factory that takes in the name of the aggregate route and essentially is reusable so that it becomes a lot easier to wire these up instead of trying to create these all the time. Constructing aggregate route repository is a little complicated to sort of build using like textual stuff. So I don't think we're going to be able to use that a whole lot. But using a factory to generate it seems to be a lot nicer. There's some other things that I'd like to eventually do, like getting this decorator to be a proper decorator. Maybe even finding a way to submit that back to EventSauce itself. I think that would be pretty awesome. But we haven't really, we're not really to that point just yet. So ultimately, where we're at is, I think we can say that the message repository implementation is finished. It's working. People should be able to run the example to get some feedback from the app. Let's see if we can. Oh, we're still getting concrete. Okay, so that's good. So let's go back to DB message repository because we aren't actually using connection. So let's drop this as a dependency because we weren't getting it anyway, and we're not using it. All right, make sure the command with arg works as well. Okay, cool. All right, so everything should be back in working order. So we'll do upgrade EventSauce and complete repository. All right, I think that's going to be it for now. Thank you all for joining and have a great night.